Welcome to So What's It Actuary About? I'm your host, Margie McKechnie, and I, along with my wide array of guests, hope to help you better understand and weather the wonderful world of actuarial science. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. We are joined by Roseanne. Thank you so much for being here, Roseanne.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's very exciting. Standard question to start the podcast. Tell us a bit about yourself, specifically where you sit in the actuarial space right now.
Okay, right now I have still a number of jobs because I've never really in my career managed to stick to one job. So I've got my job at WITS, which is as adjunct professor in the School of Statistics and Actuarial Science, and primarily working with the honours students. I also have a few PhD students, which is quite exciting.
Oh, wow.
And then my other job is as head of policy and regulatory affairs at Discovery Health.
Sure.
Been there since 2017 now. And still got some roles in the Actuarial Society and the International Actuarial Association, the volunteer roles. But I guess the Discovery and Bits are my two big jobs at the moment.
So never a dull moment.
Never
a down moment either. I think we're going to unpack each of those in a bit more detail. But before we get there, can you speak to your studying experience of actuarial science and also why you chose actuarial science? Because I'm sure you had numerous options.
Well, yeah, actually, all the way through school, I always had a very clear picture of what I wanted to do, but it wasn't actuarial science. So I remember all the way through high school, I was going to study law.
Sure.
And I actually had looked into studying Latin, and I thought I was going to do law. And then in my matric year, after being so certain for my entire school career that I had a plan, I suddenly didn't have a plan, and I wanted to use my maths and science, but I didn't want to work in a laboratory.
Okay.
So I came to WITS and I did the careers and counselling course.
Okay.
And they told me about actuarial science, and they also told me about teaching and banking.
Okay.
And the more I learned about actuarial science, the more I thought, well, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And so I applied to study actuarial science here at WITS, and then I also applied for various scholarships.
Okay.
And that was quite good because I got to through that interview process of applying for scholarships, I got to meet various actuaries who interviewed me, and then it actually gave me a better sense of
what they did,
what it was all about.
Yeah.
So the more I did that, actually, the more I wanted to do it. So in fact, by the time I was coming to WITS, I didn't even have a second option. I was going to do actuarial science.
Sure.
So then I started at WITS, and I did my BSc. I had a little hiccup in the middle in the form of Steph. Because I was pregnant at the end of second year, I split my third year into two. So I did Stats 3 in the 1 year that I actually had Steph, and then actuarial science 3 in my third year as it was.
Goodness.
So yeah,
it's amazing. But again, it's always more than one role with you. Studying obviously wasn't enough. You had to be a mom too.
Yeah, so I took on the mom role as well. So I always say it wasn't an easy path. I mean, yeah. I don't regret it. But I wouldn't certainly advocate for doing it that way around. But for me, it was great because I feel like I would have always put off being a mom.
Okay.
Until everything was absolutely perfect, yes. and having it sort of thrust upon me, as it were, it was. And if someone had told me when I was holding that little baby, wondering how I was going to even feed and clothe her and educate her, then not only would I qualify as an actuary, but she would too.
How mad!
I would have been like, no.
Mad.
So so I'm very lucky that all worked out. So fortunately, though, I did have this bursary with Southern Life,
okay.
and it was a little bit of a battle, but they agreed to continue it.
Yes.
And so at least I had a job lined up.
Okay.
So when I finished at WITS, then I started at Southern Life. And what happened was there was one actuary who was working in the medical administrator.
Okay.
And he wanted one of the new students to come and work with him. There wasn't really actuaries working in healthcare at that stage.
Yes.
So he was actually in the marketing department, and so I volunteered for that because Steve's dad was working in Southern Life as well, and I thought, well, it's not good for us to be in the same
team. Yeah, got you.
So actually, that was how I got into healthcare.
Sure.
So I went to work for Ray then in AMA, it was called at the time. And it was, there were not really actuaries working in healthcare at that stage. So that's how I got into healthcare.
And what exactly were you doing in that role, given that there wasn't really an actuarial function?
So I started off doing what they were called market research, which was a lot of sort of benefit comparisons, which then led to sort of unpacking the pricing.
Okay.
And then there was a statistician who was consulting, doing more of the modeling. In fact, they presented a paper on that sort of early healthcare claims modeling. Then we started writing experience rating algorithms, so we could do experience rating at that time.
It must be so pioneering.
So it was nice because it was taking concepts that were kind of standard concepts, but applying them into
healthcare
space. Yeah. And then I was doing my my honors part time.
Okay.
And then I was writing, the exams. So the way it worked then, when you did the honors, we had to do the four exams. And but because I wrote, I think it was pensions, I wrote in the April before I did the honors course. So the long and short was, by the time I qualified, I actually was a credit short for my honors.
Oh, no.
And so Anthony Asher said to me, I should write a health course. So write a course of what I'd learned in applying these actuarial principles in healthcare. So, and if I did that, he would give me the credit to finish my honors.
Sure. I mean, that seems like a lot to do for a credit.
Yeah. So I did that. So I started writing that health course so that,
Did you enjoy that process?
I did. And I mean, it's funny because, as I said, when I did that careers and counseling thing, there was me thinking I was going to study law.
Yes.
Then I went and did this course and said, study actuarial science. One of the options was teaching. And now I end up doing all of them, right?
Yeah,
so
because you
I'm
work
doing policy and regulatory. And actually, so it's funny how life comes in a big circle. Yeah. So I did that course, and Anthony Asher was the head of the school at that time, very cleverly. Then said to me, well, now that you've written it,
come teach it.
Come and teach it.
That was sneaky.
So that's when I started. So then I started teaching part-time, and I never stopped. So it feels like an umbilical cord that has attached me to bits for my entire career. But it's amazing, actually, that it, how fulfilling it has been. So, and then that course, actually, we built on that and then merged it with the UK course, and
Got you.
And then eventually a lot of other people got involved, and we wrote the F2E9 because, in fact, that was one of the first South African fellowship subjects. Was the
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, because it was very specific to South Africa.
Of course, because medical schemes are very specific to South Africa.
Yeah,
and so you needed that detail.
So the funny thing was, though, that when I qualified, because I qualified through the institute and faculty, I had studied all the legislation through the UK. So I knew how pensions worked in the UK. I knew the life legislative framework in the UK, but I didn't know, the South African legislation. So I did the course. It's now the CFP course, but at that stage it was the ILPA course. It was for brokers, but it was a way of then South Africanizing the knowledge. And then, it meant that having done those courses, then when we were putting together the fellowship courses, we could sort of blend those learnings and the content to come to a course that was then applicable in South Africa, but at the level of the fellowship.
Okay. So before we continue with your sort of career trajectory, when it came to studying actuarial science, what were the struggles that you had there? Was it what you expected? Like, did you ever want to do something else? What was that experience as a student?
I remember my first test in first year, And I used to pay my brother 10 Rand a week for petrol money to drive me backwards and forwards, because he was also studying. And then I cried the whole way home because I was so convinced that I'd failed that test.
I did fail my first actuarial science test.
Because I never got an answer for anything. Coming from school.
Yeah, of course. Well, I don't get anything unless I have a nice answer.
And I didn't get an answer for anything, so I thought, I failed it and I'm wasting Southern Life's money, and now they're going to come and expect me to pay them back because I can't succeed. And then when I got the result, actually, I did a lot better than I expected because it's more about
the process.
Yeah. And so I think, that it is a big adaptation coming from school to university. I'm always mindful of that when especially when I'm speaking to matriculants, and to warn them that it isn't a big adjustment. And even, when the students finish undergrad and they come to honours, it's a big adjustment learning to sort of answer in numbers to answering in words.
Yeah.
And to explain and express yourself, and getting to grips with the fact how important that is, actually.
Yeah.
Having all this knowledge but not being able to impart it in that way
is limiting.
Then what's the point, really? You need to be able to apply yourself and then express what you found. So I really enjoyed my studies, and like I said, I didn't have a second choice.
Yeah.
And so I was also really relieved when I finished and I started working, and I really enjoyed it too.
That is a relief.
But I mean, I enjoyed also just coming into a class where there were lots of people who you had things in common with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the debates and discussions, and I enjoyed sort of those, the challenge of it. I mean, as much as I remember distribution theory in second year. I mean, it's still, I feel scarred by it.
PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. But still, the challenge of getting through that. We all have our war stories about those guys, those things. But I missed the first exemption.
Your very first one?
I did. I missed. It was called compound interest, and in fact, I found out in the same week that I found out I was pregnant with Steph. I found out that I'd missed that exemption by 2%. So
that wasn't a good week.
Yeah, it was not a good week. I didn't miss them after that, but. So it was, but that was potentially a blow that could have, and even when I look at it now, I mean, that could have thrown me right off course.
Yeah, you could have been like, actually, I'm done. I'm changing.
Yeah. And the thing was, at the time, especially, when I was now at the end of second year going into third year, I needed to split my third year. And I went and spoke to Professor Boyd to explain my situation. And, there's several ways he could have reacted to that situation. But, when I first asked him if I could please split my third year, he was like, well, I have no doubt that you can cope with the load in third year. Then I explained to him why. And he was actually incredibly supportive.
Sure.
And in fact, even after that, I remember at the beginning of the following year, he invited me to join some extra lectures he was giving to bridge for students who were joining from what was RAU at the time.
Oh, of course.
And I was so moved that he remembered me and my situation. And just having someone like that express confidence in me,
yes.
it was huge. And I'm so mindful of it now that sometimes, when people are down, to just express that bit of confidence in them.
Yeah.
It can be life-changing.
It can.
Actually.
It can.
Because just the fact that I had to have a battle with Southern Life to convince them.
I'm sure, because that was still the deal that you had with them initially.
Continue. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I remember actually one of my interviews, I won't say which company it was, but I one of my interviews, this is of course when I was a matriculant still, as a female interviewee being asked if I had a steady boyfriend. And I remember thinking at the time, I wonder if they ask the male students.
If they have a steady girlfriend.
Yes. Like, what is the relevance of that? And if I could go back and say, well, no, I don't, but, I will actually be pregnant in the second year. I will actually still qualify.